Hello, race fans, and welcome to a new episode of Stay on the Lead Lap, the podcast of Leadlap.de. Normally, I'm doing this in German, but today I have a very special guest, so switching the language to English. Ryan Vargas is here with me, a true American NASCAR racer who has also a lot of experience right now in Europe. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for having me on. I know it's been a while, so it's good to be on.
All right, I would like to introduce myself, quite frankly, to the international audience. My name is André Wiegold. I'm coming from Germany. I'm from Germany, and I'm part of the broadcasting team of the NASCAR Cup Series and NASCAR Xfinity Series on German TV. And I'm also an editor and commentator and live reporter for the NASCAR Wheel and Euro Series. And this is how I met Ryan Vargas. Ryan, I saw you quite active on social media after the NASCAR Cup Series race of Richmond, because we had a very interesting finish, let's say it this way, with Austin Dillon, Joey Logano, and Denny Hamlin crashing into each other. And Austin Dillon, winning the race, getting into the playoffs. And there's a lot of controversy going on right now. We don't know if NASCAR is going to put a penalty to Dillon after what he did. But I would really like to see your point of view. Did you like what you see? And I think we have to talk about two different or separate incidents, because the Logano one and the Hamlin one were quite different. So can you tell me what you think?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with the Logano one. The Logano one, was it dirty? Yes, it was absolutely dirty. He drove from 4 car lengths back and wiped Logano out. Now, in NASCAR racing, NASCAR is unlike any other motorsport in the sense that, moving a guy out of the way, dumping a guy, you could get away with it. You know what I mean? And I think, while it was, on that, line of dirty, I don't think it was anything illegal. I actually truly believe that was by the letter of the law, that is a legal move. And I give all my perspective objectively because I know what both sides of the story are going to say. And had Austin Dillon been in that same spot, had Logano been in that same spot, I think they would have done something similar. Maybe not go in and completely dump the guy, but go in there and, bonsai and hit him. I think that would have absolutely happened. And so there's been a precedent set, that, incidents like that are common in NASCAR. Does it make it right? No. But I think by the letter of the law, I think what Austin Dillon did on Joey Logano, it's just kind of how it is. That goes back to the boys have at it mentality that NASCAR kind of instilled in the mid 2010s. I don't think it's one of those moves where, okay, cool, you won today, but in a few weeks when you need to transfer into the second round of the playoffs or whatever, Joey Logano's not going to let you through, or Joey Logano's not going to race you clean, and that's normal. That's NASCAR. What happened with Denny Hamlin, that's where it crossed the line, in my opinion. That's the first time I've given my opinion on the topic. Do I think Austin Dillon intentionally meant to right rear Denny Hamlin? No. I do not believe he meant to right rear him. I'm sure he meant to try and defend that position and try and get all he could. But at the end of the day, what happened out of that, and there's been, the SMT footage and all that, he was crossing the racing lane and got into the right rear of Denny Hamlin, and that's what turned Denny Hamlin into the wall. I made a tweet about this the other day, actually following the race, and the only incident that I could think of where a driver was right-reared for the win and actually still won was Carl Edwards and Brad Keselowski at Gateway in the Nationwide Series. And from what I saw then, it was a 60-point points deduction, a penalty, a fine of like $20-something thousand, and they were put on probation. Now, that was before the win and you're in format, right? So obviously a win means a heck of a lot more today than it did then. But I brought that one up because that's the only time, at least in the modern NASCAR zeitgeist, that that I think that we've seen somebody get right reared for the win. And the results are still different. Denny didn't completely get turned around, you could say. Austin Dillon did what he had to do, right? So again, do I think Austin Dillon meant for that action to happen? No, but I think that there was definitely hey, I need to get into the guy and hit him and keep this win. And I think it resulted in Denny Hamlin getting right reared, which at the end of the day, intent doesn't always reflect the result. And I think that right there, it just kind of proved itself. I would expect a penalty today. This is coming out before the penalty report has come out, but I would expect something to come of it. I think that it would be a pretty ugly precedent if they allow that to go unpunished.
Yep.
And again, and I'm not saying Austin Dillon meant to go in there and right rear Denny Hamlin, but the end result is Denny Hamlin got right reared in a NASCAR stock car, and we know how dangerous that is. When you right rear somebody in any racing series, when there's on an oval, you are asking to hurt the person. That is the equivalent of taking your gloves off in hockey. I do not like seeing people getting right reared, and we've seen it a lot more recently, and I don't know where it's come from. And it's, we've all been angry behind the wheel. I've gone out and slammed into guys, and I've turned guys, in races before, in late model racing and other races and stuff like that. I've been angry behind the wheel, but I have yet to right rear somebody because I know, A, that's just flat out dangerous, and B, I know that that's a quick way to destroy a race car and put a team behind the 8-ball. Yeah. And when there's tens of dozens of people at a race shop at a time that work on these race cars and build them, they didn't do anything to you. Why are you trying to hurt their day, right? Yeah, dumping a guy, okay, they spin out, they gather back up, bolt 4 fresh tires on it. But when you dump a guy and put him in the wall like that and just right rear him, again, that's taking the gloves off in hockey. And I understand why crews get upset in those moments.
I totally understand. The first incident, I totally agree. The first incident, I agree with you, Logano. It was the typical bump and run we see on various short tracks in different series, from late models to Cup Series. So I think that was fine. Interesting, you are a spotter as well, and I've heard some spotter communication there as well, like, get him and maybe even wreck him. Something you do as a spotter, maybe from an emotional side, because you're just sick of not winning races?
Yeah, I mean, hearing that spotter audio is definitely damning. I'm not going to sit here and criticize a Cup Series spotter because they know what they're talking about. Definitely, they know what they're doing, right? I can sit here all day and, I could be an armchair analyst and say, oh man, he shouldn't have said that or all this stuff. But being a spotter, having been a driver and now been making having the opportunities to go spot in these NASCAR Xfinity races and so on and so forth, you are very much in the moment. Now you are paid to be that voice. You're paid to be the cricket in the driver's ear and, deter them from getting themselves into trouble. So, while that spotter audio is damning, I'm not going to sit here and criticize it because, again, every team is different. Every team's objective is different. Would I say that, been spotting for Alpha Prime or Jeremy Clements? No. But, if you're a championship winning organization and you're running on a 30th place finishing streak, and you get frustrated in that moment, you're probably not thinking. And so, and Denny Hamlin kind of put it right too. It's like, the spotter's saying one thing or the team's saying this thing, but at the end of the day, there's only one person who has control of the throttle, the brake, and the steering, and that is the driver.
Yeah. And
so, and I've heard it plenty of times where say, oh, this, the spotter said this, or, I was told to do this. Well, at the end of the day, you control the nose of your race car. And we've seen it. I'm very vocal about that because that is something that I've learned racing in the Xfinity Series, getting those lessons from my former teammate, Landon Castle, who is a extraordinarily talented race car driver. When you are out there racing on these ovals, you control the nose of your race car. Where your nose is dictates what happens. And that goes back to, I had a conversation with Paul Jouffreau following the Raceway Venray race where, we got into each other and he told me, oh, well, I didn't, anticipate, me catching it. And I'm like, well, that's just because you're not used to it. And we had a great conversation. All's good there. So we're good there. But that's part of it. That's part of oval racing, is knowing where your nose is. And so, but back to the spotter thing, I'm not going to sit here and say anything about the spotter audio, but I am going to say that it is damning for sure.
Yeah, I had the opportunity in my life. We have a late model series in Europe as well at Raceway Venray, the only real short track we have here in the Netherlands, and very close to my home here in Germany. And I have been a spotter there, I think 3 or 4 times. And the last time I was there, my driver was second place, and I was like, "Come on, concentrate, just one more lap." And I couldn't see that his tire went down, and he was touching the wall, and I was, you idiot, what are you doing? I said, concentrate, focus. And then he spun in turn 3, and I saw the tire down, and I said, oh man, I'm so sorry, because I was so emotional involved. I wanted him to do well. So I really also used language, let's say it like this, that I would not normally do as a spectator when I'm sitting at home on a sofa, on a couch, and just watching a race, because you're emotional, so involved, and you try to do your best as well. So I totally understand that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I think one perspective is going to be interesting to discuss, because you're racing also in the NASCAR Wheel and Euro Series, and how we do penalties, how we penalize people for touching each other is quite different to what you are used to the US. Also, Daniel Suarez went to the Brazilian series. He touched slightly somebody, and he was penalized, and the win was gone. So there's, on an international level, a way different way to penalize people in racing, sometimes even very strict, and I don't like this either, to be fair. But do you think that, or what do you think about the European way, when you have small touching can be a penalty?
Well, with EuroNASCAR, there is a pretty good line. You can go out there and you can, lean fenders on each other. You can lean on each other. You could rub on each other. They don't. I haven't had any issues with that, especially with. I mean, you've seen it. Having worked in it for so long, the EuroNASCAR series, they allow you to really, get out there and race hard. And I do appreciate that they do that, and I do appreciate that they penalize some contact. I think, especially we saw it in Brands Hatch with one driver. There was some contact there, and it was pretty big contact, and it was kind of definitely hindering the battles for the win and stuff like that. So I think having that penalty system in place is definitely nice. For me, I kind of I would almost like to see a mix of what how EuroNASCAR kind of handles some of these things, and how NASCAR in the States handles these things. There's things that I like. There's things that I don't like anything in racing, right? But I think that the contact system in EuroNASCAR is good. I do like, and that's coming from somebody who comes from racing ovals and NASCAR in the US, and that also comes from the line of I like the idea of having to have finesse behind the wheel to pass people, rather than having to use them up. Now, I wish we could, use the bumper a little bit more, especially when you're a lot faster than a guy, but you just can't get by him. Sometimes it's just easier to dispose of them real quick. But it's definitely a really good format that they got going. And I would say kind of, it almost like I'd like to see a little bit of a mix of the two somehow, one day.
Perfect. That was my last question, what you would like to see, and you already answered it. Interesting is when you see EuroNASCAR, for example, it's a series where you have a small budget. Drivers come there with smaller budgets. They don't get paid. They have to pay to race or find partners and sponsors to race. So race control, in my opinion, also is a little bit responsible of having those people in a safe place, so the budget is enough to race the full season. So they're also a little bit protective to not have let's say a demolition derby out there and everybody has to quit half season because the money is gone. And I think if you go lower in the series in the ladder, you have to be a little bit stricter. But when you're on the Cup Series level with millions, of course, involved and people earning a lot of money and people spending a lot of money, but still it's a different level when you're on the pro, the elite level like NASCAR Cup Series. So I totally understand that your point there.
Yeah, it's difficult, you know what I mean? It's hard to find the line. what we saw at Richmond was definitely over it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there are ways to cleanly bump and run a guy. There are ways to lay a bumper to somebody and, not get yourselves in trouble. There are dirty ways to race the line, but that are still within the letter of the law. A lot of people like to say, oh, well, John Hunter Nemechek and Cole Custer at Canadian Tire years ago when they were both in the dirt coming across the line. But I'll sit here and say, well, they both crossed the line going straight. So, I don't look at that as dirty as what happened on Saturday. I mean, or Sunday, I should say. It's just, I think NASCAR is in a very interesting spot because they haven't had to penalize rough driving, especially for the win, in a long time, especially in its premier series. But I think that's just the nature of the beast when you have, the point system that we have now, the cars as close as they are now. I think something like this was inevitable. But now it's NASCAR's opportunity here to set a precedent that we haven't had in a while and see how it goes.
One thing I want to jump to the next topic, a little bit overshadowed by this finish, was something I found really interesting, and that is the tire option strategy thing we had in Richmond with the option and the prime tire. I saw a lot of strategy. I saw that the prime tire worked, the option tire worked really well with Suarez going from, I think, top 15 to the front, using the extra grip he had in those option tires. But then the degradation was also there for the tires. So I think there was a cool mix of strategies and a new way how to deal with a short track race. I liked it. What about you?
I loved it. I think that's something that NASCAR needs to look at moving forward. Heck, I would even say just run the red tires for the rest of the year. I mean, tire wear, it makes good racing. I know Goodyear has had to kind of push against having such a soft and gummy race tire because they don't want, what happened at the Brickyard in 2008 to happen again, which I understand. But we also, have kind of moved past that point to where we're a lot more forgiving now because I think we just want to see good racing. And if good racing means we have a gummy tire that degrades at a high amount, at a high rate, then we want to see that. We want to see races where teams are having to manage those tires. I think Bristol in the spring, while it was very entertaining, it was borderline a bit too much. You were having guys going around there several seconds slower than what they needed to, which to me isn't, while it was entertaining and it was a very fun race to watch, I don't want to see every short track race look like that. I think that was definitely too much. But I'm glad we had that. I'm glad we had a race where we could see what extreme tire deg looks like, because now we have this baseline of, oh, wow, you just went out there for 20 laps and burned those tires up. And those guys who were, saving those first 20 laps, they're catching you now. So I liked it because it offered that varying strategy. I would love to see them implement that more at some of these races. Now, the only thing that I'm very curious of is the idea of some of these tracks that we're going to, like a Martinsville. I can't even really think of many other shorter ovals, but maybe some of the road courses too. You sit here and question how well it's going to work, because Richmond in itself is a very abrasive racetrack. I know a lot of people, hear it, but they don't really think it, because, you think of Darlington as an abrasive racetrack, but I'd sit here and almost argue that Richmond is just as abrasive. Even in the Xfinity car, when I've had the pleasure of running there, after 5-6 laps, your tires are shot. You're already losing a couple tenths, and that's just how it is. That's just how that track is. So when they brought that option tire to Richmond, I had a really good feeling about it because of the fact it degrades tires already in itself. Now you have the option softer tire. You're going to have those varying things, but also Richmond is a multi-lane racetrack. There are 2, 3, sometimes 4 lanes to choose from, versus you go to a Martinsville, there's 1.5. Watkins Glen, there's a racing lane. There's no alternate lane at these road courses, right? But you could set up a pass on those long straightaways. So I'm really curious to see how they implement this moving forward. I'm interested to see how it works moving forward. I don't think at some of these tracks it'll be as big of an advantage as it would be at a Richmond. But I think for a race like Richmond, it made that race. I hate that it got a 60 on the Jeff Gluck poll, and it's probably because everybody cared about that finish, but they proceeded to forget the previous 395 laps prior to that. And that was one of the best short track races I have seen, period. It didn't have that bumping and banging stuff. It didn't have that crazy, rooting and gouging stuff that you see at these short tracks, but it was a quintessential race. It was so good. You had restarts. You had these guys flying through the field on alternate strategy, and I loved it. I love seeing just how these things worked out. Oh man, Daniel Suarez checked out to 3 seconds, but now he's down to 1 second because he burned his stuff up. Like, it's so crazy to see just what the teams were able to do with it.
What about intermediate ovals? We talk about short tracks and road courses. I'm pretty sure it's an option for that. But what about intermediate ovals? Super speedways, we don't have to talk about that for sure.
Yeah, I hope they don't try and do that for super speedways. I don't think they need to.
No.
But for intermediates, for sure, I think that there's definitely opportunity there. I would love to see it at a place like Kansas. I think that'd be really, really cool. I know NASCAR and Goodyear are definitely going to be more cautious on that front because of the load that the cars will undergo going through those corners. It's a lot faster, so there's going to be more question of, can the tire handle it? Can it run more than 10 laps? Right? They don't want a tire that's going to blow out after 12 laps.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
So they gotta. There's a lot of testing involved here. They had a data set for these option tires because they had ran the rain tires at a short track and burned them completely through. Right? So that's their data, right? That's a little bit of their data. They haven't ran rain tires at an intermediate yet. So I think moving into next year, I think we may see it more. I don't see us implementing it right away. I don't see it being an overnight change suddenly. But I do see them implementing it in the future.
Really interesting, because I like how brave NASCAR is to try something new, to try something to make the racing more exciting. So I'm all for it to try something like this, and I'm looking forward if they are trying to do something else with the option and the prime tire. At the end of August, we're going to meet each other in the Czech Republic. In the Czech Republic at Außerdem Most, a new track for you, right?
Yes, very brand new, never been.
But I bet
another one.
But I bet you're already preparing on the simulator, right? How's it going?
It's been going good. I finally know where the corners are. No, but it's been good. I've been getting more and more comfortable. Not every track is on iRacing, so I've been having to find different outlets. I've been using like R Factor and Assetto Corsa. Just getting used to the visuals. That to me is 80% of the battle. If I can go to a racetrack and know where the visuals are and the markers and all that, that's half the battle for me. So I already feel very comfortable. What's weird about me is, although I'm an oval guy, I feel really comfortable on road courses. I don't go into them, with this like cloud looming overhead of like, oh man, how's this going to be? What's going to be? Like, I like road courses. I love road racing. And if I know the layout of a track going into it, then I feel a heck of a lot better. And that's how I felt the majority of the year. We've been able to unload, in that top 10 where we want to be. We haven't had the best luck to start the season. Valencia was a demo derby. Vallelunga, we had a plug wire issue, which is, it's such a small part, but that could derail a whole race. And that's what happened to us. So, we had a really slow start to the year. We had a lot of speed, just no results to, show that speed. But now we're starting to hit our stride. Got a top 10 in Brands Hatch with the extra bonus points we got there. Had a great run in Van Ray. So I think moving into Most, we have a little bit of momentum on our side. I know we got that momentum right before a 2-month break, but I think we're still riding high on that. I feel really confident heading into it.
Yep. In Most, we're going to be next to the truck series, not the American truck series. I'm talking about real trucks, normally with trailers on it. They're going to race there. When you look at Valencia, Vallelunga, Brands Hatch with the most popular event and one oval race in Europe, is the NASCAR feeling there in Europe for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they pack the grandstands. There's vendors selling die casts and fried food, right? It's NASCAR, right? It's just overseas in Europe, and I think the NASCAR platform has a place overseas. I've gone on record saying that I think a place like Brands Hatch or Valencia could easily hold a cup date. And I wish that they would. I hope that they look into those venues. I think those places can definitely do it. I think it's just I think it's a market that wants NASCAR racing. Is it, obviously, there are types of racing that reign supreme overseas, right? It's its own thing. I'm not saying NASCAR can go over there and take over, but I definitely think NASCAR can bring in a crowd, for a one-off race or two, because it's just it's such a unique visual seeing these heavy stock cars fly across these racetracks.
Definitely, 100%. I agree. One last thing about EuroNASCAR. There's going to be Außerdem and Zolder, two tracks you quite familiar with. You already have some experience there. What about your goals?
Just be consistent, top 10 them to death. That's my thing. It's guys like Jean-Marco Urqueli, Garelli, Hesmans, those guys, they're obviously the elite guys in the series, and, they're tough to keep up with. I'm pleased that, we've been able to run similar lap times to them. I'm pleased that I've been able to keep up with them. But, for me, as long as I'm consistently in that top 10, fighting on the, knocking on the door of the top 5, that's what we want. We know where we're at as a team. We know where I'm at as a driver, right? These guys over in EuroNASCAR, they are extraordinarily talented road racing drivers. And I'm just this guy who's coming over from the States, who's been running short tracks his whole life, running NASCAR on ovals. It's a challenge, but that's why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because it's a challenge. And if I go there and run 7th or 8th, I'm going to party like I just won the race, because I'm happy with that. You know what I mean? I'm happy that we're running, with these guys competing in the mix. That's been my goal all year, is to be in the mix. And although the results at Valencia and Vallelunga didn't show what we want, I definitely feel we've been in the mix. We've been in that conversation here and there. I mean, Brands Hatch showed right there. We were catching that big pack. We were in the mix with that group. I was following my teammate Sebastian through the field, right? So we have the pace, we have the speed. It's all about just putting it all together and having a solid weekend from start to finish.
All right, thank you so much. You can, by the way, watch the NASCAR World Euro Series races live and in a highlights format for free on YouTube on the official EuroNASCAR channel. So join us there. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, then I would just say goodbye and thank you again. And we see each other in a few weeks' time then at Außerdem in the Czech Republic. And again, have a nice day. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.